After describing the glories of hearing about, remembering, and glorifying the Supreme Lord, Naradmuni is explaining what is the importance of Krishna Katha, his own example. So that's what he ended last time when we were discussing the verse number 22 says, learned circles have positively concluded that infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerity, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of the hymns, and charity, culminates in a transcendental description of the Lord, which defines in choice poetry. The purpose of everything is what? To glorify the Supreme Personality of God, and that should be the meaning. And if you see Bhagavad Gita, basically you should correlate the Bhagavad Gita. It's very, very important. There he mentioned that what he mentions, last verse of the 8th chapter, that Vedesu yagyesu tapasu cheva danesu yaktine phalam tadishtam atayeti tat sarvam idam vidhitva yogi param sthanam upeti chadyam. Person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the result derived from the study of the studying the Vedas, performing sacrifice, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, attain all these, and at the end he reaches the supreme eternal abode. See, the Bhagavatam is confirming that statement. The purpose of advancement of knowledge, namely the austerity, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of the holy name, and charity culminates in the transcendental description of the Lord, who is defining choice. So the purpose of austerity and all this is also devotional service. But if you perform devotional service, other result of other activities like performing austerity, dan, punya, you will automatically derive. That's what we discussed in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where it is said that, what is that? Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayosita Janati Asu Vairagyam Dhyanam Cha Yad Hetutam. So if you perform devotional service, then you automatically get the result of automatically get Jnana and Vairagya. So Jnana and Vairagya is a byproduct of Bhakti. But when you perform Dhan and Jnana and Vairagya, so that should be meant for achieving the devotional service. Dhan and, sorry, what is that? Jnana and Vairagya is not meant for, if it is not done for performing devotional service, attending devotional service, then it is Pramayahi Kevala. If you are doing Krishna Katha, and that is not for Krishna, then that is also useless. Now you may question, how is it? Mayavadi. No, they do Krishna Katha, but they don't accept the separate existence of Lord Krishna. They consider themselves as a Krishna, and they think that we are doing the activity. Krishna's pastime is our pastime. This kind of Katha is also Samyevahi Kevala. Okay. So after giving the importance of devotional service, especially Krishna Katha, Naradmuni is giving his own example that how the Krishna Katha has transformed him. So he says, Aham Puratit Bhave Abhavam Mune Dasyastu Dasyasyana Vedavadhinam Nirupito Balaka Eva Yoginam Susrushane Pravrushisa Nirvikshatam. This says, Oh Muni, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of certain maid servant engaged in the service of Brahmanas. He was born as a son of the certain maid servant who was engaged in the service of Brahmana. And what Brahmanas were doing? Brahmanas were following the principle of Vedanta. So Vedanta means conclusion of Veda. When they were living together during the 4 months of rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service. These personalities were not ordinary personalities. Okay. So the wonder of an atmosphere such as with devotional service to the Lord is deeply described herein by Narad. He was the son of most insignificant parentage. He was not properly educated still, because his complete energy was engaged in the service of the Lord, he became immortal sage. Such is the powerful action of the devotional service. Okay, so he was engaged in the service of Mahabhagavatas, Bhagavatas, Vedantas, uh, Brahmanas who were following the principle of Vedanta. Basically, means they were following the Vedanta Sutra. That means they were devotee, Bhagavatas. Then he says, Emaya Emaya Akhila Chapalyar Bhake Dante Achut Hidden Ki Anuvartini Chakro Krupa Yadyapi Tulya Darshana Sutru Samane Munayo Alpabhasini. Then he says, although they were impartial by nature, so, when we discuss specifically which chapter, 18th and 19th chapter of this Bhagavatam, there Prabhupada narrates that how the king like Parikshit Maharaj, they were receiving the advice from the self-realized soul so that they can give in unbiased judgment, unbiased advice, and they were not taking the salary. If we try to get advice from person who is paid, then what happened? He will not give the unbiased advice because उनका रोटी कपड़ा मकान का सवाल हो जाता है, अपनी पोस्ट पोजीशन का सवाल हो जाता है. Then what? To please the master, he give the advice which pleases the master. He will not speak the truth. But this, what he says that this, since they were tattvadarshi, they were self-realized soul, they knew very well what is the best for the living entities. Praja. Praja means man and animal both here, as per the Bhagavatam philosophy. So they were impartial by nature. And those followers of the Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. So that's why if you really want to advance in devotional service, it is very, very important to have blessings of the devotees. We must place at least one devotee in our life. Okay? Who can pray for us. So as far as, especially our Guru, as far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sport, even though I was a boy. Even nowadays, if you see children, YouTube के बिना, मोबाइल के बिना रह नहीं सकते, कार्टून या पोकेमोन क्या बोलते हैं, टॉम एंड जेरी देखते हैं, पोकेमोन देखते हैं, I forgot what else they see. They are engaged in some sports, video game खेलते हैं. But Naradmuni was not like that. Although he was boy, but his self-control, he was not attached for the sportive activity. And he says, in the addition, I was not naughty. I did not speak more than required. He was very, very self-controlled. Then he says in the next verse, Uchistale pan anumota dvije sakrutsma bhinje tad apastakil disa evam pravrittasya visuddha chetasa tad dharma evatma ruchi prajayate. Once only by this permission, I took the remnants of their food to उनका उच्छिष्ट दिया. Means they have eaten and they have left some, थाली में कुछ बच जाता है खाने के बाद. So Narad Muni received that remnants of the food eaten by these sages. And by doing so, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus, being engaged, I became purified in the heart. At the time, the very nature of the transcendentalist become attractive to him. So, as soon as we eat that uchishta, remnants of the food left by the Mahabhagavat devotees of the Lord, what happened there? His heart was purified. And at that time, what happened? That the nature of the devotee become attractive to Narad Muni. So Narad Muni was attracted by the nature of the devotees. Okay. So then in the next verse he says that Tantravaham Krishna Katha Pragayata Manugrahena Sunavam Manohara Tam Sadhyame Anupadam Vismavataha Priyasra Sravasya Ingam Mama Bhava Ruchi. So Vyasdev, in that association, by the mercy of those great Vedantis, I could hear them describe the activities of Lord Krishna. So you see, first of all, what happened? He got an opportunity to serve them because of his mother was engaged. So once by the permission, he get the remnants of the devotees leftovers in the plate, whatever was left over in the plate, that was eaten by Naradmuni, and because of that, so all the sinful reaction was eradicated. Okay. And finally, he was become the and he become attracted. He was attracted by the nature of the devotee. And then what happened? Because he became attracted to the nature of the devotee, he started associating with them. And when he started associating with them, by the mercy of the Vedantis, he could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. And thus listening attentively. My taste for hearing of the personality of God had increased at every step. So as soon as you hear attentively, not that multitask but as soon as you hear attentively, then what will happen? His taste for hearing of the personality of God had increased at every step. So devotee's mercy is required, and as soon as it happened, what happened? We can see the Naradmuni was attracted by Krishna Katha. So then he says in the next verse, तस्मिन् तस्मिंस्तदा लब्धरुचेर् महामते प्रियस्रवस्य अखिलता मतिर्मम ययाहमेतत् सदसत्त्वस्व मायया पश्ये मयि ब्रह्मणि कल्पितं परे. Oh, great sage, as soon as I got the taste for the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching. Okay. And as my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle covering, for both the Lord and I are transcendental. To gradually develop the taste of the personality of Godhead, and as that happened, his attention to hear the Lord was unflinching. And as his taste was developed, he could realize that it was only in his ignorance that he had accepted gross and subtle covering. So Narad Muni first of all asked the question to Vyasa, "Oh, the son of Parasar, are you happy by describing the body and mind as a means for self-realization?" So Narad Muni is telling. So earlier, because of ignorance, I have accepted gross and subtle covering as a mean of enjoyment. But then he realized no, that is not there. Then he realized both that Lord and I are the transcendental. Then he understood no, subtle and gross coverings are not the everything. Beyond that, there is a transcendental living entity, and there is a transcendental Lord. So that's what Narad Muni realized that oh, beyond this body and mind, there is a soul that is very myself, and there is a supreme Lord. Then in the next verse he says, "Itam sarat pravru सिका वृत्त हरे विष्णुवतो मे अनुसचम यशो अमलम संकीर्त्यमानम मुनिभिर महात्मभिः भक्तिर प्रवृत्त आत्मा रजस्तमो उपह." Thus, during two seasons, the rainy season and autumn, that's Chaturmas, I had the opportunity to hear these great souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of the Lord Hari. Vishnu Vato me Anusavanam Yasho Amanam. Unadulterated glories of the Supreme Lord. As the flow of my devotional service began, the covering of the mode of passion and ignorance vanished. As soon as he continued hearing what happened, his devotional service was already begun, and as he continued hearing, the covering of the mode of passion and ignorance vanished. Then he said that तस्यैव मे अनुरक्तस्य प्रसिद्धस्य हतेन स श्रद्धानस्य बालस्य दान्तस्यानुचरस्य च. I was very much attached to those stages. I was gentle in behavior and my sins were eradicated in their service. So he was hearing Krishna Katha and he was serving those Mahabhagavats. So there are two things. Of course, we should hear Krishna Katha and we should serve the Mahabhagavat for self-realized devotees. That's very, very important. Okay. So in my heart, I had strong faith in them. So we should have faith in the devotees, especially Mahabhagavat. And I had subjugated the senses and I was strictly following them with the body and mind. And another point was that he was following them. Of course, he was serving the Mahabhagavat, he was hearing them talking about Krishna, and he was following their instruction. So this three things he was doing. When he was gentle in their behavior, in his behavior, his senses were controlled. So these are the some what should I say? Some qualities we should aspire to attain that transcendental state. Okay, so then in the next verse he says that Dhyanam guhyatam yat tasa saksat bhagavato ditam anvochana gamishyanta krupaya dinavatsalaha. As they were living, those Bhakti Vedantas, who were very kind to poor-hearted soul, instructed me in that most comprehensive subject which is instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then when they were living, so after the end of when the Chaturmas ended, and they were living, so this Mahabhagavatas instructed Naradmuni about the most comprehensive subject which was instructed by the Personality of Godhead himself. So then in the next verse he says, यनेवाहं भगवतो वासुदेवस्य वेदसः मयानुभावम् इदं येन गच्छन्ति तत्पदम्. So by that confidential knowledge, I could understand clearly the influence of the energy of Lord Krishna, the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything. By knowing that, one can return to him and personally meet him. So this is the glory of Krishna Katha. He realized that Naradmuni. Then in the next verse he says that etat samsuchitam brahmastata patraya chikitsitam yat isvare bhagavati karma brahmani bhavitam. O Brahman Vyasdev, it is decided by the learned that the base remedial measure of removing all the trouble and miseries is to dedicate one's activity to the service of the Supreme Lord, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So, till the previous verse number 31, Narad Muni gave his own example at what is the power of Krishna Katha. Okay, so now verse number 32 onwards, Narad Muni is giving the conclusive advice to Vyasdev. What is the conclusion basically? He said that, oh, personally I have realized that I have heard Krishna Katha and I was liberated from the mode of ignorance and patience. And I was free from the subtle and gross covering when I become to the transcendental stage. So now he's giving the conclusive statement from this verse onwards. That what he says in this 32nd verse that we recited, एतत् संसुचितिं ब्रह्मस्ता पत्रय चिकित्सितं ईश्वरे भगवते ब्रह्म ब्रह्मणि भाविता. O Brahmana Vyasa, it is decided by the learned that the base remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activity to the service of the Supreme Lord Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So whatever we do, that should be done for Krishna. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. What he says? In the chapter number 9, he says, Yat karosi yad yasnasi, yad jivosi dadaki, yat karosi. Forgot that exact word. Yat karosi, yat, verse number 29. Sorry, 20. यत् करोसि यत् श्नासि यत् जुहोसि ददासि यत् तपस्यसि यत् तपस्यसि कौन्तेय यत् कुर्वसि मदर्पणम. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. So that's what Naradmuni is saying. It is decided by learned that best remedy is measure of removing all troubles and miseries to dedicate one's activity to the service of the personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, here Naradmuni is telling to that. So basically, message is proper. There is no adulteration in the message. Exact instruction is followed. Krishna is telling that should be done for Krishna. Naradmuni is telling this should be done for Krishna. Srila Prabhupada also said this should be done for Krishna. So we are in parampara basically. Then he says that Amayo yascha bhutanam jayate yena suvrata tadeha mayam dravyam na punati chikitsitam. So, oh good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? So, here, an expert physician treats his patient with a therapeutic diet. For example, sometimes when we take milk, then what happens that we take milk so much at empty stomach, then there is a disorder of the bowels. And if you want to cure that stomach disorder, then what we have to do? We have to take the transformed form of the milk, that is curd. If we take curd, then disorder in the stomach will be cured. So same thing is telling Naradmuni, though good soul, does not the thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? So if disease created by milk has to be cured, then we have to take curd, right? Similarly, the threefold miseries of the material existence cannot be mitigated simply by material activities. Such activities has to be spiritualized. Just like milk was transformed into curd, same way our material activity will be spiritualized. Means if we add Krishna in our activities, then what will happen? That will cure our problem. Such activities has to be spiritualized, just as the fire iron is made red hot, and thereby the action of the fire begins. So till the time you keep the fire rod in the iron, what will happen? Fire rod also take up the form of the fire. Iron rod also take up the form of fire. Okay. So similarly, our all material activities has to be devoted in the service of Krishna. Similarly, the material conception of the thing is at once changed as soon as it is put into the service of the Lord. Very simple and clear. That is the secret of spiritual success. Krishna also says, Yat karosi, yat dasnasi, yat karosi, yat dasnasi, yat juhosi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi, konta yat karvosi madarpanam. Whatever you do it for me. The best way to make the best use of bad bargain is to use everything in relation with the supreme spiritual being. So whatever we are doing, the best, making a best use of bad bargain is use it in the service of Krishna. Mobile, use it in the service of Krishna. Laptop, use it in the service of Krishna. Okay, if you want to have so much tendency to speak, then speak Krishna Katha. If you have so much tendency to eat Krishna Prasad, don't eat without offering. Everything is an emanation from the Supreme Spirit. By his inconceivable power, he can convert spirit into matter and matter into spirit. He can do both. Therefore, material thing is at once turned into spiritual force by the great will of the Lord. If you engage in everything in the service of the Krishna, that material thing will be turned to the spiritual thing. So that is the way to treat our material disease and elevate ourselves to the spiritual plane, where there is no misery, no lamentation, and no fear. So when everything is thus employed in the service of the Lord, we can experience that there is nothing except the Supreme Brahman. The Vedic mantra that everything is Brahman is realized by us. So this is the secret. Everything has to be utilized in the Krishna consciousness. Everything has to be Krishnaized. In the next verse, he says that evam nrunam kriya yoga sarve samsruti hetavah tat evatma vinasaya kalpante kalpita pare. Thus, when all men's activity are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities such which caused this perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of birth. So basically, if someone enters so much in sexual activity, if you use it for Krishna service, how? We need to produce Krishna conscious children. That very activity will help him to get rid of from this material world. If someone is making so much software, develop it for Krishna service, website and all. Someone is making video, make it for Krishna. So if we dedicate our service to Krishna, then what happened that if he use the mobile for other things like pornography and all, then it will be the cause for our bondage. But if we use it for Krishna Katha, it will be the cause for our liberation. So that's very simple. Okay. So in the next verse, he says that yadatta kriyate karma bhagavad paritoshanam jnanam yattadhinam hi bhakti yoga samanvitam. Whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the mission of the Lord is called bhakti yoga. So any activity to do for the satisfaction of the Lord is called bhakti yoga, or transcendental loving service to the Lord. And what is called knowledge become concomitant factor. So yeah, so basically whatever, of course it is very simple. Again, the same thing is mentioned. So then he says that concomitant factor means, check the what is the meaning of concomitant. I think it's a byproduct, concomitant. Un- uh, Naturally associated. So when you do bhakti, knowledge is concomitant factor, means knowledge is byproduct. Same thing we discussed in the second chapter, right? Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Pravivita Janati Asu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yad Hetukam. It will automatically produce knowledge and renunciation. Renunciation. The same way, knowledge is and so-called knowledge become concomitant factor. That will be, a byproduct. Automatically, you develop that knowledge. Then he says, Kurvana yatra karmani bhagvat chiya sakrita gunanti gunana mani krishnasya anusmaranti cha. So while performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one constantly remember him, his name and his qualities. So while performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, if we do as per Krishna's instruction, then we can remember him, his name and his quality. So if we do some activity for Krishna, then we will remember. Okay. So then he says, Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam Vasudevaya Dhimahi Pradyumnaya Aniruddhaya Nama Sankarshanaya Cha. So let us all chant glories of Vasudeva along with his plenary expansion Pradyumna, Aniruddha and Sankarshan. Basically, Naradmuni is saying, let's chant all glories, So this is the importance of Krishna Katha. So forget about Krishna. There are his expansion of Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna. Even if we chant there, you will be free from the bondage. So then in the next verse he says, Iti murtai abhidhanena mantra murti murtikam yajate yajya purusham sa samyak darsanam puman. Thus he is the actual seer. Thus he is the actual seer who worship in the form of transcendental sound represent the supreme person of Godhead Vishnu. There is no material form. So if someone is means the actual seer who worship in the form of transcendental sound representation. So if someone worship Krishna, Krishna Katha, the supreme person by glorifying Krishna, hearing about him, remembering him, so then if someone is self-realized, then he will do this thing. What? Previous verse he said, let's for previous to previous verse, what he said that while performing duties according to his name and qualities, one constantly. And what does he do? Uh, so when he does this thing, constantly remember Krishna. So he's the actual seer who worship the supreme person of God and Vishnu, who is a transcendental, whose form is represented by transcendental sound vibration, and who has no material form. In the next verse, it says, Imam swanigamam brahman na vityamad anushritam adame jnaname swarya swastin bhavatam sakesava. O Brahmana, thus by the Supreme Lord Krishna, Naradmuni is telling his realization. O Brahmana, means he is telling to Vyasa, thus by the Supreme Lord Krishna, I was endowed with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord as inculcated in the confidential part of the Veda. Sorry. O Brahmana, thus by the Supreme Lord Krishna, I was endowed first with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord as inculcated in the confidential part of the Veda. So this has happened by the mercy of the Lord. Therefore, so that only that confidential part of the Veda, which is a transcendental knowledge of the Lord that can be inculcated in the heart. Then he says that then with the spiritual opulence and then with his intimate loving service. So first uh, he endowed the transcendental knowledge of the Lord in his heart, then with the spiritual opulence, then with his intimate loving service. So gradually develop that. In the last verse, he says, Swam api adhabra sutra vishrudakam vibho samapyate yena vitam bhubutsikam rakyahi duhukera muhur arditmanam sangsesa nirvanam ushnati nanyatha. Then now Narad Muni is concluding for Vyasa. Please therefore describe the Almighty Lord's activity which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankering of great learned men and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from the material pains. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such a misery. This is the ultimate conclusion given by Naradmuni Ved Vyasa. What is that? I'm repeating again. Please therefore describe the Almighty Lord's activity which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankering of the great learned men, at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from the material pains. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. So basically, those who are learned men, they will also be satisfied, and people in general who are always suffering from material pains, they will also be free from this material suffering. They will also be free from this material miseries. The last is said that indeed there is no other way to get out of such a things. Na ushnati na niyatha. Does not get out by other means. Ushnati na niyatha. There is no other way to come out from this thing. So that is the conclusion of Narad Muni. So it's very, very important to read and hear this Srimad Bhagavatam. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. If you have any question, comment, feedback, you can unmute and ask.